federal judge refused to rubber stamp the deal, citing concerns over confusing constitutional issues. And the White House getting challenged on what seemed to be a shift of position about President Biden's involvement in his son's business dealings. What the press secretary says. A scary scene in New York City this morning as witnesses describe a high-rise crane catching fire before falling to the ground. A packed Congress today as 3 witnesses testify about their first-hand encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, otherwise known as UFOs, which they say is being suppressed by the government. Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas facing heated questions from Republican lawmakers over his handling of the southern border. And the Federal Reserve raises interest rates again, now pushing borrowing costs to their highest since the global financial crisis. No deal for the Hunter Biden plea agreement today after a federal judge questions the constitutionality of the deal. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has more details.
The plea agreement between President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and the Justice Department fell apart on Wednesday after Judge Mary Ellen Noreika questioned the specifics of the deal. Hunter was expected to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax counts of willful failure to pay federal income tax as part of the deal to avoid jail time on a felony gun charge. Prosecutors were planning to recommend 2 years probation and to wipe the gun charge from Hunter's record. But Noreika, a Trump appointee, was concerned about the constitutionality of the deal. According to the Associated Press, the judge said it seemed like the parties just wanted to rubber stamp the agreement. A key question was whether or not prosecutors planned to continue their investigation and if more charges were expected in the future. Prosecutors confirmed that Hunter was still under investigation but didn't offer any details. Noreika gave both sides 30 days to explain why she should accept the deal. Hunter pleaded not guilty to the tax charges. In a separate twist to the case, the House Ways and Means Committee filed a brief late Tuesday asking the court not to accept the plea deal. Contained in their submission was information related to IRS whistleblower testimony. But shortly after their motion was filed, a court clerk received a call requesting that sensitive grand jury, taxpayer, and Social Security information be kept under seal. The clerk said the lawyer identified herself as an attorney for the Ways and Means Committee, but she was in fact a lawyer with the defense team. Attorneys for the defense said there was a misunderstanding. Judge Noreika threatened to sanction the law firm, but then she temporarily placed the documents under seal. The defense had until the close of business today to explain why the documents should remain under seal. Meanwhile, House Republicans are continuing their probe of the Bidens. Hunter's associate Devin Archer is slated to testify to the House Oversight Committee on July 31st. In a social media post on Monday, Committee Chairman James Comer said, "We look forward to speaking with Devin Archer on Monday about Joe Biden's involvement in his family's business affairs." He told Fox News on Tuesday why it's important to get Archer's testimony.
So Devin Archer would know more about particularly Burisma than anyone we could talk to, because Devin Archer was on the board of Burisma with Hunter Biden.
Archer was sentenced to 1 year in prison in 2022 for defrauding a Native American tribe. He and others used Hunter Biden's name to convince the tribe to invest assets. Emails show Hunter was involved with Archer's firm, but Hunter's lawyer said he was unaware of the scheme. Comer has said that investigators obtained evidence that the president was in communication with some of Hunter's business associates. He said Burisma, that Ukrainian energy company, is at the center of everything in their investigation. Steph?
Thanks, Arlene.
Imagine the criminal defense attorney's like, huh? What? And then having the discussion with the client, and that's when the whole thing starts crumbling.
Right. So the hearing today was fairly dramatic, as you point out, and he was poised to plead guilty and then ended up pleading not guilty to the charges against him. So how do you see the way that the hearing unfolded?
Well, I think the hearing unfolded the way I hoped it would, and I certainly would have unfolded that way had I been the judge, and I was a judge for 5 years. I mean, you want to quiz the counsel in front of you to make sure everyone's on the same exact page and understands and has a knowing and voluntary waiver of his rights, so he pleads guilty. And here, I think the judge not only had a written plea agreement that she was going to quiz anyway, but then saw two whistleblowers testify, saw all the other blowback that was happening, and although that's not part of the court record, she's a human being. She can see that there's more to this deal than really meets the eye, and she can see that especially the DOJ is not being particularly forthcoming about all the other moving parts that are out there. So I think she was entirely appropriate in her line of questioning. And now the question is, is it just paused, and are the parties going to try to get something back together on paper and narrow the focus of the plea? Is the plea completely off? I think all options are on the table going forward. I think if I was a Biden, and not just Hunter Biden, I wouldn't sleep well tonight because with a ongoing investigation into whether he failed to register as a foreign agent, and of course everyone's presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but if that continues and that shows there's some there, and there are other parties related to the money that came to Hunter through the activity he had as a foreign agent, that could lead to other people, up to and including the president. So I think some people aren't going to have a good night's sleep tonight and the future nights if the DOJ goes after this, and then the House Judiciary Committee and the Oversight Committees keep digging to get to the bottom of this. So I think this is not a good scenario for the Biden family.
All right, we will have to wait and see how this unfolds. Thank you so much, Cully Stimson, former federal prosecutor and senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Really appreciate it.
Seeing them about once every 4 weeks. So when you look at the size of people coming over, the very, very small criteria of the watch list, you can see just how, okay, this looks like there's a pattern. But also, it wasn't just one gang. These were gangs from MS-13, 18th Street Gang, and a Balkan organized crime group, which means the traffickers were coming from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Romania. So it's happening on a multitude of countries as well. So it's okay, this is clearly a concerted effort that they're going to be trying to utilize.
The DHS whistleblower said he doesn't believe the government is able to fix the problem with the asylum system by itself.
I don't foresee fixes or changes until the whole system is going to be changing itself. So that's what my take is still. If you want it to be solved, you have to end it. And then that's going to create problems again. Fine. Then you can fix those too. But it's if you believe in government solutions, they're going to give them to you. And those are usually never good.
According to Variety magazine, Sound of Freedom is the first independent film to reach $100 million at the North American box office since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Angel Studios on Wednesday announced international release dates for the film, covering 23 countries, including the UK, Australia, and much of Latin America. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
The TV
fundamentally broken immigration system is working.
Bullshit.
Over the last few months, House Republicans have been gearing up to launch a potential impeachment proceeding against the secretary. They accuse Mayorkas of undermining the operational control of the southern border, encouraging illegal immigration, and lying to Congress. Some Republican members on the committee told me that Mayorkas and the Biden administration have done very little to stop the influx of illegal immigrants.
Well, the reality is very clear. It's that we have had a historic level of illegal border crossings since this administration began. We're talking about 5.6 million as well as 1.5 million known gotaways.
But I think the evidence is very clear that they're padding the numbers a little bit right now, redefining whether or not somebody was actually at the border and had contact with a border agent.
The southern border has long been a battleground for partisan disputes. Just recently, the Biden administration sued Texas Governor Greg Abbott over a floating buoy barrier installed along the Rio Grande to deter illegal immigrants from crossing the river. Democrats on the committee praised Mayorkas, saying that the border situation is under control.
Border crossings are down right now, so we should all be celebrating the
Really?
work that they're doing. It's a tough job, right?
Whatever Mayorkas did worked. That's what we should be talking about right now.
Since the end of Title 42, the Biden administration has implemented new measures requiring border crossers to schedule interviews through the CBP One app, and all applicants must have records of asylum claims in other countries before reaching U.S. soil. Mayorkas insisted that illegal crossings at the southern border have dropped by more than half compared to the number prior to the end of Title 42.
He's lying.
Sam Wong, NTD News.
Holding up the promotions of top military officials. On Wednesday, a representative for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America asked Tuberville about his hold.
But you're ruling on people's pay raises, promotions, livelihoods.
Tuberville most likely referred to the almost 2 million service members, of which only 250 are affected by his hold. The senator wants the military to overturn a policy which funds travel and leave for military service members who get an abortion. The policy also applies to a service member whose spouse gets an abortion. While speaking to The Hill on Tuesday, Tuberville said he probably won't lift his hold before the 5-week August Senate recess starting next week. Watch.
No, I'm not going to change my mind. First of all, I've had almost zero communication with the White House. I mean, if they really cared about readiness and the things that really need to be happening with our military, they'd change this back in 5 minutes and then send a bill down there to the floor and let Congress go through this.
To talk about this and more, I spoke with retired Army Colonel and author of The Nation Will Follow, John Mills. What does that tell you that the Biden administration allegedly isn't trying to find a solution here?
Well, I mean, that's pretty much says it all from the Senate. One of the quickest way to resolve a stalemate like this is to pick up the phone and give the senior staffer a call for the senator and start working on a solution. It's as simple as that.
This month, President Biden called Tuberville's hold irresponsible. Other Democrats are saying the senator's actions are hurting military readiness. Do you think that waiting 5 more weeks will affect military readiness, and if so, how?
The simple answer is no. The senator is exercising their right to put a hold on these matters. Guess what? Executive branch, this is part of the process. So respond to the concerns of the legislative branch.
Congress is scheduled to head into a 5-week recess starting at the end of this week. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
That may have been blacksmiths or became blacksmiths throughout the atrocities that were being put on them and owned by other people. I mean, the terrible, ugliest part of our history, and still able to persevere and show resiliency in using these skills to move forward, either to buy their freedom or to use them post-slavery and acquire their freedom and use them during the time when they broke free from slavery.
So, since that's not how people are understanding the sentence, are you considering rephrasing it to make the meaning more clear?
As Dr. William Allen has pointed out, who was involved in writing these benchmarks, the nuance of the individual stories need to be told as part of the entire story. Not an implication that slavery benefited the enslaved people, but showing the resiliency and the willpower and the perseverance of those individuals. We have to tell the stories of individuals. They need to be told within the framework of the atrocities as all of this is going on.
So next I'd like to look at who participated in drafting these standards.
Yeah, we had a 13-member work group made up of scholars and Florida educators who delved into the benchmarks, deepening them. We had benchmarks that existed from 1994, but this is an expansion going deeper, covering the horrors that occurred during the passage of slaves coming over. The atrocities committed during and the violence committed during plantation life and throughout slavery. And then it goes on to talk post-Civil War about the Jim Crow laws and the atrocities committed to African Americans and the civil rights movement and the fight to earn their rights. All of the story is told, and this group of scholars worked for months to delve into the individual details and talk about every single one of these issues without any varnishing.
Now, the Florida Education Association has called the standards a disservice to students. So I'm just wondering, were teachers' unions invited to participate in drafting them?
Absolutely. The teachers' union actually participated in 5 meetings. They were involved and, in fact, lauded the work of the work group during one of the meetings. And again, they had ample time to comment on this through the period that it was open. They were open meetings, open to the public and open to the union, and they participated. And then at the last minute, after going through all that, they decided to participate in this letter while not commenting or adding anything to the standards.
Now, was there any debate over this point during the process of drafting the document?
The meetings of the work group were public and archived, and there was ample discussion where they reached a consensus on what standards and what were in there in the American history standards.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for your input, and thanks for joining us today. Manny Diaz Jr.
Indictment charges the gangsters with running a criminal enterprise which engaged in various different criminal acts, including murder, attempted murder, witness intimidation, drug trafficking, fraud, and illegal gambling.
We spoke with the El Monte Police Chief, Jake Fisher, who told us how the department prepared for this morning's raid in terms of intelligence gathering and planning.
Well, it was led by then Chief Ben Lowry, who reached out to the FBI. The El Monte Police Department has a FBI agent that works for our department, and we work together with many other agencies with the San Gabriel Safe Streets Task Force, and that connection that we automatically had, and Chief Lowry's leadership at that time helped naturally flow this investigation very swiftly and quickly.
Chief Fisher also tells us about challenges they face when conducting a raid involving dangerous criminals.
Anytime you're dealing with a violent criminal street gang, there are obvious challenges. They have no respect for authority or good members of the community, so that is always dangerous and complex. But we were able to be very successful in this investigation and came out to a good conclusion.
They put satellite dishes up on top of our building. This is Channel 11. And I used to get it real good.